Hi everyone, my name is Mathieu Chasson and I welcome you to my channel. In today's edit video, I'm going to show you how to edit a picture to make it look vintagey in black and white using Capture One 2021 for Fujifilm. So let's go right to the computer. So here we are. For today's picture, I've taken a Ford Model A, I believe it is. I'm not a car expert, but it's an old car, and what a better subject to make a vintage photo. So the first thing we want to do is go into the color tab and go all the way down to the black and white tool and enable black and white. Using the black and white sliders here, the color sliders here, you can adjust some of the colors, but this one doesn't really have a lot of colors. The thing I do usually, you just try and see if it makes a difference. In this image, you don't see much difference. I might raise this one a little bit. But other than that, all the tones were rather neutral, so it doesn't make much. But sometimes it does make a huge difference, and it's good to play around with those sliders to make things look better, make some part of the image pop out a little bit more. So let's just do basic exposure to start. It's not too bad, but I might want to bring the exposure up a little bit. Increase the contrast. It's always good to increase the contrast using a black and white. But I'm not going to overdo it here because we're going to use the curve tool to make our kind of vintage look. Brightness a little bit also. You can play with saturation sometimes. When you've got vivid colors especially, it can increase contrast between those colors if you play with the saturation slider. But in this case it doesn't do anything. So we'll leave it like that. We'll lower the highlights a little bit, but not too much. Increase the shadow to get much more details in the car. Decrease the black to keep some of that contrast and sharper black tones in the darker areas. Again, I'm not going to overdo anything here because we're going to go through the curve adjustment later. If you want to go, sometimes I like the, softer clarity, but if you want to go with a vintage, more old look, I find that increased clarity will make that. I wouldn't go all the way up, but maybe halfway, 30, something like this, will help create bring some of the details out. And of course, vignette, we're going to do that at the end, but vignette, of course, will make an image look a lot more vintagey, but we'll come back to the vignette later just to do our final adjustment. So here's the curve tool. To make you'll notice that there are different types of vintage or old black and white feel images. Some are really dark and contrasty, but others have those softer blacks. So for this one, we're going to go with the softer blacks that are a little bit more faded look. You see, the more you get, the more faded it is. This is way too high, but you don't have to go too high. Sometimes just a little bit. And then by making the S-curve more pronounced, we're going to make a much more contrasty shot. And you can go quite a way here. When it comes to black and white, I don't mind having the whites blown out and the blacks really dark. So from this already we can see that we have a sort of a vintagey kind of feel to this one. Maybe even increase the vignette because there's no details around the car that we want to keep, so the higher it is the better. So there we are. That's already pretty good. After that, we can try different. Maybe we can see if we increase, that's a little too much, the contrast. Always it's always a good thing to go back to your settings once you've kind of found your feel of your image. Shadows, might increase shadows a little bit because we've really took a lot of light out of the darker areas. So, and even the black. Let's go like this. All right, so now the last thing that we'll do is, because we're looking for this old feel or old feeling in this image, we're gonna go and add some grain in there. So you go to the details tab, and here you can select go into the film grain adjustment. The first one here, you can select the kind of grain that you want. I think they're from finer to harsher. It kind of, so I like silver rich or soft grain usually. Let's go with silver. Now the impact is how much the grain is how much grainy the image is going to be, how much the grain is going to show. If we go to 100% here, if you go all the way up, you see that gets really grainy. If you go down, you start seeing less and less of the grain. So I kind of usually like it halfway. And granularity, I think, is the size of the grain. So if you bring it up, it's much bigger. If you bring it down, it's a lot very fine. You can barely see it. So there again, 50-50, maybe add a little bit more here just to add this feel. Again, you can play with different types of grain. They have like the harsh grain, tabular looks good. You know, there's different, you know, silver rich. I like this one, but it's totally up to you. Play with this to find a feel that you like. When you zoom out, you don't see it as much, so maybe just to make it feel, we'll just raise them a little bit more. There. So that's looking pretty good. And the final thing you can do is, older images are rarely pure black and white. They often have like this old, you know, yellowish tone to it. So if you go in the color tab, you can go into the color balance, and you can, especially in the highlights, you can bring your highlights into the yellow orangish part pretty high, depending how strong you want the effect. That's too much, but I would go maybe, you know, 3/4, 1/2, something like this in this area here. And you can do it to the mid-tones also. I wouldn't go as far. In shadows, I like to bring the shadows in the blue. I know it usually paper don't get some bluish. If you go all the way, yeah, how about that? Let's keep it all in the more, you know, there we go. So this is like a old faded image, and yeah, that's it. And you know, like, I've used a very vintagey subject here, but really these kind of effects really work well with, you know, more modern images also. I love this one. Often people fear of, you know, adding grain to the images because, you know, it kind of looks like your image quality is not there, but I've made these images into black and white, added grain, and, you know, I love these images. Even if they're, you know, they were taken a few days ago of people playing hockey. So you don't really have to have a vintage subject to use these kinds of vintagey black and white feel. I feel like I've said vintage way too much in this video. So, all right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's, again, I always say it, experiment with the sliders, experiment with different settings. Like I said, this is not the only way to make a black and white, or a black and white that looks old. Like I said, some will be very contrasty, dark blacks and bright whites, very contrasty with a lot of grain, and they look awesome. This one we went for the faded blacks, which I tend to prefer the softer faded black look, but they're all good. It all depends on what you like. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, bye bye.